Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is Fran Pflieger, and my pronouns are she, her. Welcome to Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm going to be your worship associate for today's service, and I want you to know that whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your beliefs, gender identity, immigration or documentation status, disability, and wherever you are joining us from, in person or at home, you are welcome to bring your whole self here. If you're joining us for the first time today, please raise your hand if you're in person, or add your name in the chat. Anyone new? I see no hands. Thank you for taking the time and for taking the risk to join us today. You are invited to, if you are a newcomer, you're invited to complete the newcomer form that will be linked in the chat. And if you've been attending for a while and you want to become a part of this religious community, please reach out to Nicole Singer, our membership coordinator. I believe she's here today. She's in the back. Hello, Nicole. Pastoral visitors at Cedar Lane are an extension of the ministry team, and Barbara Tomar is our pastoral visitor today, and Barbara is available to support you in person as well as online for any pastoral needs. And now I'm very happy to say that we welcome back to Cedar Lane the Reverend Norman Allen. As many of you may know, Reverend Norm serves as the minister at Davies Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Camp Springs, Maryland. He's a graduate of Wesley Theological Seminary, served as our intern minister for 2 years, and he's also an award-winning playwright whose work has been produced locally by the Kennedy Center, Shakespeare Theater Company, and Olney Theater Center, and across Europe and Asia. Welcome again, Reverend Norm. As we enter this time of reflection and remembrance, connection, and community, we acknowledge that we gather as Cedar Lane UU Church on the traditional lands of the Nacotchtank people, from which the name Anacostia is derived. They are a part of the Piscataway group of tribes. We honor with gratitude the land and the people who have protected it through the generations. We gather in remembrance of those who were enslaved and worked this land without choice or reward. We gather in gratitude for all who have gone before, whose love and labor helped create and sustain the mission and ministry of this religious community. In this spirit we gather. In this spirit we begin. Let us greet and welcome each other.
All right. Good morning. I see the new placement of our bells is working to call us back together. So now let's go ahead and keep that same spirit we just had, greeting one another, and stand in body or spirit to sing hymn 126, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life perfection fills our hearts with joy and love, teach us ever to be faithful. May we still thy goodness prove. Come thou fount of every vision, lift our eyes to what may come. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in thy home. Hear the cries of war fall silent, feel our love glow like the sun. When we all serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come thou fount of inspiration, turn our lives to higher ways. Lift our gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us bind ourselves in union, help our hands to love. With thine aid, O fount of justice, earth be fair as heaven above.
Good morning. It is such a pleasure to look out and see all these familiar, beloved faces. What a pleasure to be back here. I am returning to the place and to the people who taught me how to be a minister. So thank you for that. As we begin this worship service, inspired by the life of Reverend Dr. A. Powell Davies, I invite you to consider his words and his wisdom as he reminds us that we grow by fellowship. The life of our minds and the joy of our hearts is very largely the gift of others. We long to share our lives with other people, to understand other minds, to be ourselves understood. Such fellowship, such communion is life itself. We are what we are because of all the human world in which we live, a world of manifold relationships, and because of our intimates, our close companions, our friends. We grow by fellowship, by relationship to other people, by not being alone. Come, let us worship together.
As Peter and Lucy Lowenthal come forward to kindle the chalice, reminder that this is a symbol of our shared faith and gathered community. Please share in the chat where you're lighting your chalice from, and please rise in body and or in spirit to share the chalice lighting words. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit, touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life. Thank you.
Next, we have our hymn number 20, Be Thou My Vision. So I'm going to ask you to rise again in body or spirit. Be thou my vision, O God of my heart, not be all else to me save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom and thou my true word, I ever with thee and thou with me, God. Thou my soul shelter, thou my high tower. Raise thou me heavenward, O power of my power. Riches I heed not, no world's empty praise. Thou my inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only first in my heart. Sovereign of heaven, my treasure thou art.
Let's center ourselves and enter this moment calling upon all the sources of love that are within, among, and around us. We gather in a sacred space across time and space, a sanctuary amid the many challenges of life, a center from which we may gather strength to face these challenges with courage and hope, faith and love. Within our Cedar Lane community, we celebrate with Usha Charya on the birth of her first grandchild, Anjali Rivka Charya, born to Anna Gersten and Ananth Charya on July 22nd. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to others whose lives are lost and whose lives are impacted by war, calamities, and the COVID-19 pandemic in our nation and in our world. May these friends of ours, our companions in the world, and all the joys and sorrows we hold in our hearts, be held in the embrace of prayer and silence.
Please join me in the spirit of prayer and contemplation. Spirit of life and of love, Spirit that moves through and among and within us and makes us one. We gather this morning as companions to those experiencing the sorrows of life's journey, just as we are companions to those who revel today in the joys that bless our travels. We gather this morning in gratitude, for we know that whatever may come, we journey together, and that our companions are without number. We know that we are accompanied in joy and sorrow, in daily tasks and blessed rest by all who have come before us. We remember that we are a faith centuries in the making, carried forward through gifts of love and light, of endeavor and sacrifice, carried forward by our forebears, known and unknown, forebears whom we honor with our deepest gratitude. Spirit of life and of love, Spirit that moves through and among and within us, we gather this morning grateful for the wisdom of those who are long departed and those who remain in the living memory of this community. We gather grateful for the wisdom of Reverend Dr. A. Powell Davies, who reminds us that we need the infinite, the limitless, the uttermost, all that can give the heart a deep and strengthening peace. As we enter the silence together, those who are mourning a loss or marking the anniversary of a loss of a loved one, you are invited to rise in body and or in spirit, or to share those names in chat. May we hold the silence as the silence holds us. Amen.
The offering we take up every Sunday is a symbolic and real way demonstrating our commitment to the mission and ministry of our faith. Today, we share our offering with the National Network of Abortion Funds. The National Network of Abortion Funds builds power with their members to remove financial and logistical barriers to abortion access by centering people who have abortions and organizing at the intersections of racial, economic, and reproductive justice. Abortion Funds envisions a world where every reproductive decision, including abortion, takes place in thriving communities that are safe, peaceful, and affordable, where all people have the power and resources to care for and affirm their bodies, identities, and health for themselves and their families in all areas of their lives. As we shift the conversation about abortion, it will become a real option, accessible without shame or judgment. Let's watch this short informational video together.
Or hand to hold. Abortion funds are fighting to ensure. Abortion funds offer support in many ways. They might provide information, money, travel planning, and accommodations, accompaniment, or emotional support. People working or volunteering with an abortion fund might offer rides to clinics, a place to stay, meals, childcare, or a hand to hold. Abortion funds are fighting to ensure everyone has the power and resources to decide if, when, and how to grow their families.
You can support the work, this important work, by texting 73256 plus CLUUC $, or you can give online or using PayPal, the QR code, or you can mail a check to the church, and finally, you can even place your gift in the offering plate. However you choose to give, we are grateful for your generosity. Our offering will now be given and gratefully received.
I've missed you, Jasmin. Our reading today comes from a sermon preached by Reverend Dr. A. Powell Davies at All Souls Unitarian in Washington, D.C. on January 13th, 1957. As he spoke to those present in the sanctuary, he was also heard live at the smaller congregations that had begun to form around the Beltway, including this one. That hybrid service of 1957 was made possible through the placement of a telephone at the All Souls pulpit and corresponding telephones connected to speakers at each of the suburban churches. Many of you know this story. Often the receiving telephone and speaker were hidden in a flower arrangements, creating a sort of floral burning bush from which Reverend Davies' voice would emanate. Through that miracle of technology on that cold morning in 1957, he shared these thoughts about religion. Religion is not something separate and apart from life. It is life. Life of every kind viewed from the standpoint of meaning and purpose. Life lived in the fuller awareness of its human quality and spiritual significance. And he said this about God. God is identified as spirit, which means aliveness, breath, the life that is breathed by the soul. It is a pity that the simplicity and purity of these definitions is ever departed from. It is a pity that creeds that say more than this are ever written, for in reality they do not say more, they say less. Beyond creeds, there is room for symbolism and poetry, bringing us the glow of a truth that is living, the fire of moral passion, the sweet wonder of all loveliness, all that is splendid and high with hope, all that is struggling and watered with tears. All this, yes, and all that begins with this and then goes out beyond the far horizons. This it is that is full of the power and the glory, the joy and the beauty, the strength and the wonder of God. The words of Reverend Dr. A. Powell Davies. As I referenced earlier, it is because of this congregation, because of Cedar Lane, that I serve a congregation named for Reverend Davies. It was during my second year as your intern minister that you and my beloved mentor, Reverend Abi, sent me forth as a part of a cross-church partnership to serve on a very part-time basis the struggling Davies Unitarian Universalist congregation. This month, I begin my 6th year there, now as their full-time, called and settled minister. I want to say from them and from me, thank you. Thank you so much. I love that the congregation I serve is named for Reverend Davies. I love that it's named for a spiritual leader for whom the word God does not refer to a single deity or a divine personage, but it is a word that encompasses the ideas of aliveness, of breath, of the life that is breathed by the soul, and all that lies beyond the far horizons. And by chance, I have discovered that my connection to Reverend Davies is more than theological. I've discovered that he and I have a personal connection. If you've watched Ted Lasso on TV, which I hope you have, you've become acquainted with the English town of Richmond. It's just outside of London, a lovely, lovely place. I spent my freshman year at Richmond College and later lived in Richmond while working in the theater in the West End. Later still, I returned to Richmond College to teach a theater course. So I know and love Richmond very much. Well, lo and behold, I'm reading a biography of A. Powell Davies, and it mentions that he went to seminary in Richmond, England. So that's a coincidence. He was a Methodist back then and attended the Methodist Theological College in Richmond. Well, reading those words, some bells started going off in my head, and I remembered that my Richmond College had been founded as a Methodist seminary. So yes, young A. Powell Davies and I walked the exact same halls. We ate bad English food in the same dining hall, and perhaps procrastinated in the library. If you walk out the gates of the campus and take a right, walk up the hill and take another right, you find yourself on Richmond Terrace, one of the most beautiful views in England. There's a steep drop down to the Thames, but you're far enough from London that it's a meandering Thames at that point, beautiful and peaceful. I spent hours there with a book to read and journal pages to fill, and I expect Reverend A. Powell Davies did the same. My path to the Davies Unitarian Universalist congregation in Camp Springs, Maryland, unfolded in a remarkable, destined kind of way, learning that the congregation's namesake literally walked the same halls, the same paths and roads and byways that I love so well is just astounding to me. So, some quick facts about this guy, this Reverend A. Powell Davies. Arthur Powell Davies, born in 1902 to Welsh parents and forever proud of his Welsh heritage, he considered himself an immigrant in England and in the United States. He was a Welshman first and always. At 16, he was already working as a shipping clerk and supporting the dock workers when they went on strike. 2 years later, the leader of that strike is voted into Parliament and makes the young Powell, as he was known, his secretary. In that atmosphere, our friend A. Powell Davies meets the great playwright and socialist George Bernard Shaw, and Shaw tells him to go into politics. A. Powell Davies says, "I have a higher calling." And it's then that he goes to the Richmond Theological College, intent on becoming a Methodist minister. While in Richmond, he meets, courts, and ultimately marries Muriel Hannah. He has great success at his first church near London, but is drawn to the American brand of Methodism, which he thinks will offer him greater theological freedom. So he and Muriel emigrate in 1928. He serves Methodist churches in rural Maine. I know we have some folks from Maine here this morning. And then he serves in Portland. In Portland, he meets Reverend Vincent Silliman of First Parish Unitarian. Their conversation inspires Reverend Davies to enter into fellowship with the American Unitarian Association and answer the call to a Unitarian church in Summit, New Jersey. So let us say thank you, Reverend Silliman. In New Jersey, Reverend Davies becomes deeply involved in the work of the National Unitarian Movement, including its restructuring and modernizing. Having witnessed the devastation of World War I, he stumbles in his response to the rise of Nazism in Europe. He calls for peace and even appeasement of Germany, but soon recognizes that appeasement is neither possible nor appropriate. It astounds me in the summer of 2022 to say, among the many causes that he works to promote during these years is family planning. He dares to preach about sex and its blessings. He becomes friendly with Margaret Sanger, and in 1943 joins with other liberal clergy to sign a statement of support for Planned Parenthood. The following year, he accepts a call to All Souls in Washington. A year after that, the United States drops atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Military and political leaders here in the United States infamously celebrate that act of destruction and death. Reverend Davies and the Congregation of All Souls respond by sending barrels of art supplies to children in Hiroshima. The children return the favor, showing their gratitude by sending their original drawings back to the congregation in Washington. The relationships developed in that year continue to this day. My son Isaac traveled to Japan with members of All Souls a few years ago. The family he stayed with in Hiroshima later came here and stayed in our home. My own family experienced firsthand, the living legacy of this great minister's work. But Reverend Davies also recognizes the need in his own neighborhoods, the neighborhoods surrounding All Souls. He leads a campaign that calls on Washingtonians to boycott restaurants that refuse service to black patrons. He insists that the Police Boys Club, which meets at All Souls, change their policies of segregation and welcome all boys into membership. When they refuse, Reverend Davies kicks them out and creates the fully integrated Columbia Heights Youth Club to replace them. On top of all this, he is a great, great preacher. You can find audio recordings on YouTube. You'll hear a hint of that English-Welsh accent. You'll hear the crystal clear diction and delivery. But more important than that is the content, the ideas that he shares. Two of my congregants at Davies, two anchors of the Davies congregation today, were married by Reverend A. Powell Davies and heard him preach on numerous occasions. I interviewed one of them, Dave Phillips, in preparation for coming here today. An engineer, Dave started by taking a super scientific, evidence-based, statistical approach to the experience of hearing Reverend Davies in the pulpit. He told me, I knew that if I went to 3 services at All Souls, 1 would be good, 1 would be really outstanding, and 1 would be so good that you would have been foolish not to be there. That 1 was a sermon you could use for a lifetime. You could hang a lifetime on it. A lot of ministers, Dave said, a lot of ministers, if you're lucky, you get 1 really outstanding sermon a year. With Reverend Davies, every 3rd one was like that. You didn't want to miss it. I didn't ask him what my personal statistics were. Dave went on to use some poetic language of his own in describing the brilliance of Reverend Davies' rhetoric. He remembered this about how a Davies sermon unfolded. It would be like looking at a cloudy night, because he'd start by giving you the negative arguments first. Then he'd destroy those negative arguments and start to show the positive side. It was like he was parting the clouds so you could see the stars. Then he'd point those stars out to you, and you'd think, why couldn't I do that myself? And that's what I call religious genius. The prophetic word of that religious genius filled All Souls to capacity every Sunday. Unable to fit anyone else into the sanctuary, Reverend Davies had the idea of establishing satellite congregations in the suburbs. That was the beginning of Arlington, Paint Branch, Mount Vernon, Davies itself, and of course Cedar Lane. The expansion of our Unitarian faith, circling outwards from the nation's capital, speaks to the power of Reverend Davies' work. So does the fact that 3 sitting Supreme Court justices attended his memorial service, a memorial service at All Souls in 1957. He was only 55 years old. He had died having overworked himself, having ignored his doctor's advice, and suffering from a blood clot that had led to a fatal hemorrhage. Looking at his actions, his work in the local, national, and international communities, it's clear that this is a man to emulate. This is a person that we might consciously or subconsciously bring to mind at moments throughout our life and certainly throughout the life of a congregation. His actions alone would be enough to warrant that. But let's take a moment and consider his words. These brief excerpts can't capture the brilliance of a complete, carefully structured sermon, but they give us a taste. Listen to this. If I were asked what single quality every human being needs more than any other, I would answer the ability to laugh at themselves. When we see how quaint we are, how droll our ambitions are, how comical we are in almost all respects, we automatically become more sane, less self-centered, more humble, more wholesome. To laugh at ourselves, we have to stand outside ourselves, and that is an immense benefit. Our puffed up pride and touchy self-importance vanish. A clean and sweet humility begins to take possession of us. We are on our way to growing a soul. Having moved beyond the restrictions of Christian creeds, having freed himself from the specifics of trinities and resurrections and virgin births, Reverend Davies could fully embrace the teachings and example of the radical rabbi from Nazareth. He offers us this portrait of that great man. It can truly be said that Jesus of Nazareth was characterized by an exceedingly warm friendliness. He delighted in the company of other people, all sorts of people. There was no constraint upon him, even when he consorted with respectable society's despised outcasts. Jesus liked people. He needed them, all sorts of people. Whoever they were, he shared his life and thought with them freely and simply because it was his nature to do so. More than a century after the great William Ellery Channing proudly outed himself as a Unitarian, the great Reverend A. Powell Davies outed himself as a liberal. He wrote, "I glory in the accusation. I am a liberal without apology, a liberal without misgivings, a liberal without regret. I am an unrepentant liberal. So far as I am sorry for anything, it is not because I'm a liberal, but that I am not more liberal than I am. Of this I am certain, that no return to false beliefs or authoritarian folklore can avail us in the world tomorrow any more than in the recent past. Their day is over. Only the free mind can possess the future." He continues as though speaking to us this morning in this complicated summer of 2022. His words resound in the wake of violence and treason, in the wake of Supreme Court decisions that deny us our rights, in the wake of ongoing attempts to rewrite our history. Reverend Davies tells us, "The world to which traditionalists would like us to return was never such a world as they describe. It was a world of famine and disease, a world of many cruelties and few humanities, a world of arrogant and avaricious hierarchies, of tyranny and oppression, of ignorance and fear, of toil and tears. It is the world which tyrants and authoritarians have been trying to revive, no matter what the cost, in blood and agony. And it is the world which every decent man and woman for several centuries has been trying to leave behind." The more I learn about Reverend Dr. A. Powell Davies, the more proud I am to serve the congregation that bears his name. The more I learn about this great man, the more convinced I am that we will benefit greatly from studying his words and from living into the courageous, community-serving, justice-seeking example that he sets before us. My friends, my old and dear friends, may it be so. I invite us now into a period of reflective silence. In the quiet of our hearts, let us honor this great man's memory and let us consider how we might carry forward his legacy. Friends, let us enter the silence together. Amen.
I'm going to do something just slightly different. I'm going to ask before we stand and sing that we open our hymnals to number 295, Sing Out Praises for the Journey. And sometimes we get singing these hymns and we're singing words on pitch, and I just really want to call out verse 1, if you'll read it together with me. Sing out praises for the journey, pilgrims we who carry on, searchers in the soul's deep yearnings, like our forebears in the time. We seek out the Spirit's wholeness in the endless human quest. Now, we just heard this amazing story about an amazing man and what he has done, especially to inspire our congregation. Now, I ask you all, how many of us are on our journey seeking out the Spirit's wholeness? All right, good. So I'm going to give you a selfish plug right there. Those of us that raised our hands, I want everyone to know, even online, it takes about 28 people to run our Sunday school. And I guarantee you will find a lot of the Spirit's wholeness, you'll find a lot of insight, and you'll find a lot of joy in just volunteering in our youth program. So I invite you to think about that as we stand and sing hymn 295. Sing out praises for the journey, pilgrims we who carry on, searchers in the soul's deep yearnings, like our forebears in their time. We seek out the Spirit's wholeness in the endless human quest. Look inside your souls, the kindling of the earth our pilgrims do. Find the Spirit always restless, find it in each mind and heart. Touch and hold that ancient yearning, kindling for a newfound truth. Stand we now upon the threshold, facing futures yet unknown. Hearth behind us, wayside hostel, built by those who knew wild roads. Guard we ere the sacred embers, carried in our minds and hearts.
Please be seated. And I invite you again to join me in the spirit of prayer and contemplation as we consider these final words from Reverend Davies. Still we know that we can go forward in new and fateful ventures. We know it when we have found the faith that takes us through our darkest hours, when we have heard the desolate silence broken and felt a stirring in the stillness of despair. No matter what the buffetings of circumstances and no matter what the force of inner conflict, we have found the faith by which all belief is ransomed, the faith by which great purposes, no matter what the obstacles, are undertaken, the faith that is the living substance of the soul itself, the faith we never lose. Amen.